Welcome to The Straight Edge, the podcast where we cut through the noise to build a stronger community. I'm Bill, your host, and together with my wife Denise, we'll be diving into conversations that matter.
We're here to share stories, explore different perspectives, and have some fun along the way. From local stories to broader topics, we've got it all covered.
So, if you're looking for genuine conversations and a sense of community, you're in the right place.
Join us as we embark on this journey together.
This is The Straight Edge. Let's get started. Hey, what's up, you savages? Welcome back to The Straight Edge, the podcast where we keep it real and straight from the barbershop. Today, we've got a great guest joining us, Steve Paranto, a Marine Corps veteran and a Chesterfield County School Board member. He's been coming in the shop for about 6 to 8 months now, and if you've ever met Steve, you know he's all about service, whether it was in the military or now in public office.
Yeah, Steve's got an incredible story. He served 8 years in the Marines, and now he's working to improve education, especially for special education programs in Chesterfield County. We dive into some big topics in this episode: the challenges of military life, how to build strong communities, and why getting involved in local politics actually matters. Plus, we even get into some of the hot-button school issues, like redistricting and budget funding.
And hey, so before we jump back in, just a quick heads up, you're going to hear a little background noise, some clipper hum here and there. And that's just part of the authentic barbershop experience. We've also had to do a couple cutaways and pick it back up. So this isn't some fancy studio. We're bringing you real conversations, just like the ones we have in the chair every day.
So sit back and listen in and enjoy our conversation with Steve Paranto. Let's get into it.
Good morning, Steve. We've got Steve Paranto with us.
Good morning.
We appreciate you coming in. And we talked a little bit once before, but had some audio technical difficulties.
Correct.
So we'll give this another shot. And we'll just kind of tell everybody. So what we talked about before, your background is you were in the Marine Corps.
Yes. Yeah.
Before.
8 years. 8 years. Yeah, I had gone to college and down in Kentucky, and 9/11 had just happened. And so it was one of those, we knew that this would be something in the history books, right?
Right.
And the thing that resonated with me at that time was when my kids or my grandkids, which I got 3 kids now, but when my kids or my grandkids read about this and they ask me about it, like, what did I do?
Right.
Did I sit on the sidelines and, be a cheerleader? And nothing wrong with that, but, that was not enough for me. I felt as though I needed to contribute. So, my grandparents, both grandfathers, fought in World War II. My dad was drafted to Vietnam, but by the time that his number, or I guess, or when he should ship or whatnot, Nixon had already said, hey, we're not sending anymore. So he just missed that, send date, if you will. And so I guess this was my generation's, time to call, if you will. So anyway, joined the Marine Corps, served 8 years, thoroughly enjoyed my time in, but I knew I wasn't there for a career.
Yeah.
I'd lost some friends, and I figured it was just going to be a matter of time before, in my opinion, my, ticket was punched.
Right,
and so,
right.
like I said, I was deployed, I served, I enjoyed what I did, but I also wanted to start a family and, make a career for myself. But I knew it was not in the military.
Right.
So I served my 8, and towards the end of that, I met my wife and got married, had kids, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Where did you separate? Like from the.
So I was active duty. I switched over to the reserve status,
Okay.
and then
You currently reserve still?
no, I'm out altogether.
I got you.
No, I'm out altogether. Once I knew that I found the person I wanted to marry and wanted to, have a family, I didn't want to drag them base to base and, every 4 years move around. And I mean, some people can do that and God bless them, but that's not anything I wanted for my kids. I wanted them to have
same here.
roots, wanted them to settle down and, be raised in an area to be able to call home. And
I had a similar path. I joined the Air Force right out of high school.
Okay.
And Gulf War vet and all that kind of stuff like that. But I got out right before 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And it was the same reasons. I spent the first 10, 11 years single, got married, and I may volunteer for everything under the sun when I was single.
Of course, yeah.
And then I got married, I'm like, it's time to kind of rein this in a little bit and start looking at because I know how hard it is on military families.
Yes.
You
Yes.
see it, like the how hard it is on marriages with
Oh,
deployments.
oh yeah. The
and
divorce rate's so
TDYs. Oh
high.
my gosh.
It is difficult, and anyone that tries it, man, good luck, right?
Right.
Not a negative thing, good luck, but just it's difficult.
It's extremely difficult.
You're gone more often than you're home, and if you got kids, your wife is left, or maybe the other way around. Maybe a female that's in the military and their husband's not, and the
Right.
husband's left at home raising the kids, and it's tough.
It's very tough on the spouses.
Yes.
Extremely.
Yeah, spouses of military service members deserve, in my opinion, a lot more credit than maybe what they're given,
Right.
because they really are holding down the fort, if you will.
Right.
While their significant others out doing whatever, even if it's, going and serving, or I shouldn't say serving, but going for training, in a different area for a while. It's still a hardship,
Yeah.
on that
Oh, yeah.
family. But that's what makes America great. We've got people that want to step up and do that kind of thing, and answer that call to, I think it was President Reagan that said we're one generation away from losing our freedom.
Right.
And knock on wood, thankfully, every generation so far has answered that call. So
Absolutely.
hopefully we continue that trend.
Right. That's one of the reasons I got out at that time too. Is I wanted to give my marriage a chance. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just when you be in it and you see just how tough it is on couples.
Correct.
Anybody who can, if there's any military spouses or people that stayed together for the full 20, somebody who did their career and all that, retired,
Yeah.
they deserve a special plaque. I'll tell you that much.
Absolutely.
Oh,
I agree. I agree. Yeah, serving and that's how I was, that's how I was raised. I was raised to, what's going on around you and how can you contribute, in a positive way.
Right.
And so, I've got three, my wife and I, we've got three kids in Chesterfield County Public Schools, and, one of them is in special education. And that's one of the reasons I ran for school board was I saw the special education arena of Chesterfield County was deplorable. So much so, thankfully, they eventually led to firing the director of special education before I got on the board, because, staff, I think, even recognized, hey, we're not in a good place, here, and our kids are not being serviced the way that they need to. And so I ran. Thankfully, the will of the people was they liked what I had to say, and so I was elected and just completed my first full year last year. So I'm 3 months into my second year of 4. And, we've made great strides. We just passed for special education in our budget, $9.7 million, the highest ever given, or I should say granted, special education in Chesterfield County. Our budget, after everything's said and done, will be over $1 billion. And so, we're growing rapidly. I think everyone, recognizes and knows that. But how are we taking care of those that, need help?
Right.
And so, my advocacy from day one has been special education. And I think, one of those, what's the expression? Campaign promise delivered
Right.
type thing. And so still delivering on that promise, and still have 2.5+ years to go to continue to improve on that. But, we have a new special education director. Things are heading in the right direction. I sit on the Special Education Advisory Committee. It's a great board comprised of citizens who are directly tied into special education, whether they're educators or parents themselves of kids that require services. And so, when you listen to the people up front, right? I think with politics today, that's the issue, is that people speak, but they don't feel like they're being heard.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I on the local level that I really appreciate is I listen and I take what I'm being told. Now, I may not agree with everything, right? But I'm still giving it the time of day, because maybe there's a perspective that I'm not aware of.
Right.
And so I want to educate myself. I don't know everything, never claim to, but, you also want to surround yourself with intelligent people that know what they're talking about, and it helps guide your thought process and your
Right.
thinking.
No, I have to commend you on. So I came from a family that's the same. Like, we're always involved in community, and that's kind of what this podcast is about as well. And the barbershop, and bringing back community around the barbershop, and that's why I want to talk to our guests.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have a very diverse clientele and a community that comes in here, and they're just some very interesting people that come.
I'm
through.
sure.
I love talking to them.
Yeah.
yourself included. But one of the things, like growing up, I was always kind of raised that way of like to be involved in my community,
Yeah.
right? And whether I agree or disagree with people on whatever, the people who are involved, I have the utmost respect for, right? It's easy to sit back on the sideline and critique whoever's in the spotlight.
Right. Yep.
You know, the white horse always gets shot at, right?
Yes.
So, no, and there's people that I don't really agree with that I know, but they're completely active. They're out there. They're doing, right?
Yep.
And I respect that tremendously.
You know, I think that's something that our current society has lost. You know, there's a board member that I serve with, and she and I are polar opposites. Think differently, approach things differently, believe differently. But I have an immense amount of respect for her. She, you know, she's a mom. She's raising her kids. She's active, like, you know, to your point, right? She's not on the sidelines being a keyboard warrior, right? She's trying to make a difference the way she thinks the difference should be made. Now that's, you know, obviously conflicting to what I believe, but I think where, you know, she and I differ to where society is society says, well, if we don't agree, then we hate each other and we're not going to talk.
Right.
And we're going to say, you know, all these nasty things and what have you. That doesn't get things done. You have to compromise.
Absolutely.
You have to be able to come to the table, have a conversation, understand what's going on, and there has to be some compromise in what you're wanting to get or what that person's wanting to, you know, to get after. And I think we've lost that. You know, we've gone down, you know, we've just quickly gone to, I don't like you, so therefore you're my enemy.
Right.
And
And therefore anything you have to say
is wrong.
Is wrong.
Correct. Yeah. And it gets you nowhere. It
Well,
really is what divides our country.
It's that, and so what it does, it stifles growth,
Yes.
right? Personal growth.
Yep.
If you're not willing to listen or see a different perspective,
Correct.
and that's something I've been doing myself personally, a lot of self-development and a lot of self-growth, and that was one of the things I kind of learned recently, more recently, was perspective.
Yes.
And you really got to put things into perspective and see other people's perspective.
100% agree.
It's eye-opening. It really is.
It is, especially when you encounter someone that was raised differently than you,
Absolutely.
thinks differently than you. You know, it's not comfortable.
No, it's not.
But if you're willing to, if both parties are willing to come together and have that difficult conversation, and not immediately jump to accusations or finger pointing or,
Right.
you know, but just listen. You don't have to agree with everything that's said, and you can respectfully leave that meeting or, you know, that interaction and say, yeah, I don't agree with anything that I just heard, right?
Right.
But at least you understand where someone's coming from and why they're coming from the viewpoint that
Absolutely.
they are. And you can still have respect for people. We don't have to like each other, right? But we still have respect for one another.
Common decency.
Yes.
Common,
Yep. And overall, I think in American politics, we've lost that.
Oh, we absolutely have it. Politically speaking, absolutely.
Yes,
And
correct,
I said, and
yes.
that's another reason for this podcast. I said, well, it's just community. It's about getting away from the national stage. And this is where the people that are in your community are the ones who actually have more of a direct effect on your day-to-day.
Right. Correct.
Than the government in D.C. kind of
Yes.
thing. I mean, don't get me wrong, it has a profound effect, but
Correct.
the more direct effect and the place where you can directly affect change as well is more local.
Absolutely.
And yourself, like you said, you had you felt special education was lacking in Chesterfield Public Schools, and you had a child with that need.
Yes.
And rather than just complaining and so on, I'm going to take some action.
Right.
I'm going to get involved, and you're kind of hanging yourself out there too. I'm sure your first year, I mean,
Our
has
first
been pretty eye-opening.
It was. It was. You know, we tackled some pretty difficult things my first year. You know, we tackled the whole transgender conversation in schools, cell phone policy, bus schedules, redistricting. It was a pretty eventful and packed, you know, first year.
And those are some pretty emotionally charged topics as well.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. We had one board meeting that I think we set the record for the longest board meeting. We didn't leave until just after 1 a.m.
I'm not sure if that's the one I went to. I did go to one of them. There was two kind of around addressing the trans topic.
Yes.
And the redistricting, I think.
Redistricting.
We went to one of them. We sat there for a few hours, and we kind of basically supported one of a friend of ours who comes to the shop. You know what I mean? And it lives in our neighborhood as well. And we kind of after he got up, spoke his piece, and he was down the list.
Yeah.
And we sat there for a while, and we heard a lot of it. And honestly, I would recommend to anyone
who's listening, go to some of these meetings and start getting more involved in like Chesterfield County government
Yes.
and attend some of this stuff. We've been to a couple now. It's kind of, now shame on me. I haven't been attending but now that I've been to a couple, one was shortly after they raised everybody's property assessments.
Yes.
And it was a pretty steep jump
Yes.
for a lot of us. And so my thing about it, I heard a lot of people complaining about it, but when we showed up to the meeting, there was a half a dozen of us there to kind of, it was pretty poorly attended.
Yes, that is a frustration I have as well. Now being an elected official, is that a small portion of folks for the budget, for example, will say, well, our teachers deserve more than a 3% increase, and I agree, 100% agree. And there's some other funding out there that people could advocate for. However, when we hold town halls for the budget, 3 people showed up. 3. And I represent the Matoka district, and we've got more than 3 people living in the Matoka district, right? And so, yeah, to your point, it's one of those. Yeah, you can sound off online and post on Facebook and what have you, but the advocacy behind it really isn't there the way I think it should be. Now, there are some things that we can't help, right? We only have so much money. We're not in the basement printing it, right?
Right.
We only have so much we can do with what we have. And so, folks might feel, well, this area needs more attention. 100%. But, this really comes down to our state representatives, our delegates, our state senators. There's a study out there called JLARC. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a Joint Legislative Audit Committee. And JLARC has found that Chesterfield County has been underfunded by the state of $300 million.
Wow.
$300 million. So if we had received everything from the state that we were supposed to receive, we could easily give our teachers a 6%, 7%, 8% increase.
Now, what's the reason behind that? That's a pretty
significant number.
Yeah.
So that 300 million isn't just in one year. That is an accumulation.
Oh, yeah, right.
Over the past several years.
That's still
sure,
that's
but
still
it's when you take that
real
money and you spend it elsewhere, and you decide, well, we're going to
so it got reallocated.
Correct. Absolutely. Yes. And listen, I'm not there on the House floor to argue with folks that are in opposition to my thinking. Just like at the school board level, that's why you vote for your state delegate and state senator. But at the end of the day, when we're saying, well, hey, listen, we need to increase our GPA, and I'm not saying throwing money on it solves the problem, because money doesn't always solve the problem, right? You have to find the right people.
Right.
They have to be passionate about what they're doing. But you find those people because you create a culture that they want to come to, they want to be a part of, and the community thrives off of that. And so I'm not saying that we don't have that in Chesterfield County, but I think we can do better than what we are doing. And I truly believe we're headed in the right direction with our new superintendent, John Murray. Dr. Murray is a student at Chesterfield County Public Schools. He taught in Chesterfield County Public Schools. He was an administrator for us, and now is in the top spot as a superintendent. He understands. He's been here, he's seen it, he's lived it, he gets it. So I couldn't be any more happier with our board in hiring him, because he sees, I think, what everyone else sees, because he's so invested. His kids go to Chesterfield County Public Schools. His wife is a part of Chesterfield County Public Schools. And so, when you talk about someone that's invested, it's him.
Right.
And so, advocating for, additional, money and what have you, we need folks going to our state representatives, going to the session meetings up in the gallery, advocating, whatever they think needs to be done to get the message across, obviously, in a safe manner and
Right.
respectfully. But you have to be able to, say, hey, enough is enough. We're underfunded. And, when we have to trim our budget to make things work, that's a problem. For a county of our size, and last year was the first year that we were over $1 billion budget. This will be our second year that we're over $1 billion budget. We should easily be $1.5 billion, if not more.
Oh my gosh, with the rate of growth.
Absolutely.
this county is
We're opening
experiencing.
3 new schools in the Matoka district. one coming up this August, which is the Deep Creek Middle School. We'll have one next year, which is the new elementary school being built right behind Deep Creek Middle. And then in 2027, we'll have the new high school.
Yeah.
All in the Matoka district. So the growth is undeniable. And I understand people get upset, our property taxes go up and what have you. Are there other ways to get what we need? That needs to be, looked at too. But at the same time, you have to meet the demand. We've got the supply.
Right. So speaking of that, the redistricting of the new schools and stuff, that was a really hot button topic.
It was.
I don't have a dog in this fight anymore.
Sure.
My kids grew up and went through Cosby. We live in Hampton Park. My kids both graduated from Cosby. Now, back then, the hot button for us, at one point, they were talking about sending Hampton Park to Manchester.
Yeah.
And that was a little infuriating for me at that time. Now, I can imagine, like I said, I've seen, and I do follow you on Facebook, and I see you put out, like, you communicate what's going on and stuff like that.
Yeah, as best I can.
As best you can. And then that's to kick that up.
Yeah.
But I've seen where that was extremely unpopular. Well, with the people who were posting online, right?
Correct. So the redistricting really impacted.
And I think what they kind of, one of the things I picked up, now that would kind of maybe give you the chance to kind of address it.
Sure.
Right? Is from what I recall and remember, there was a couple options that were being presented at one point. It was like option 1, option 5, but then they ended up with option 2.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yes. So option 1 and option 5. So there was a survey that was sent out to 5,000 parents in the area. And out of 5,000 parents, 418 replied. Right? So
we were talking about option 1, option 2.
Option 5. Yeah. So there were 5,000.
Option 5, 1, and 2.
Yeah. So there were 5,000 surveys that were sent out to parents in the area. 418 responded. I think it was like 6%. And so there were board members that said, okay, well, that's enough for me. Now, this was in the Matoka district. I'm the Matoka district representative. 418 is not enough for me. It's an input that to take into consideration 100%. Their opinions matter.
It's not really a good representative
but
sample.
It's not a representative sample of what the overall people felt.
Right.
However, I will say the majority of responses that I received from folks said, don't separate my kids. Now, what they're meaning by that is we have kids that were uprooted from one elementary school sent to the other when Mosley, opened up. Middle school was shifted. And then if you, divided neighborhoods up, which one of the options had done that, I think it was option 5 would have had just Fox Creek going to the new middle school, but Fox Fire, Foxcroft, all the other Foxes would be left out. Kids in the area, they play on the same sports teams, community teams, attend the Y together, right? And other activities, Boy Scouts and stuff like that. And so, that really resonated with me to not separate kids and uproot them again. And so for me, the only option that really made sense was option 2. And what the community may not be privy to is I've been a proponent for option 2 from the word go, because it kept everyone together. Now, the downside to option 2 was the possibility that in 5 years, we would be at 102% capacity at Deep Creek Middle School. And so I weighed that, but that's in 5 years. Who knows what's going to happen in 5 years? And a perfect example, look at the Trump administration. They came out and said that if you work for the government, you have to go back to the office.
Yeah.
How many people in Northern Virginia that work for the government have moved to Chesterfield County because they could work from home? And they were making a Northern Virginia salary living in Chesterfield County, right? And now those folks have to make a tough decision. Do I find another job, or do I move back up north and, resume my career? That's one example, but we don't know what 5 years is going to bring us. And so to base a decision on what might happen versus what we have right now, option 2 opens every school under capacity. Now, the other options did as well, don't get me wrong. But what option 2 did that the other ones didn't do was keep everyone together. And so
by everyone together, what does that mean?
Meaning all the local subdivisions.
Okay.
So Hampton Park, Harper's Mill, all the Foxes, Hampton Green, Magnolia Green. it kept everybody together.
Okay.
If you had option one, the Foxes would not be a part of the new middle school. And Hampton Park, for example, would be driving right by Fox Creek to drop their kids off at school. That didn't make any sense from a logistics standpoint.
Right.
And so you had these different ways of trying to make it work for everybody. And at the end of the day, it was option two. And what really cemented that was there were two board members that came out and drove the area, and they realized what I've been talking about all this time in regards to option two. And they agreed after seeing it themselves that option two is the best bet. So that's how we settled on option two. Now, the outcry to that, and I understand from our community, was we were going into that meeting going to debate either 1 or 5 and vote
Right.
on one or the other. And so for some folks, option two was a dark horse. It was never off the table, but understanding that the community was told, hey, we're going to consider option 1 or option 5. And I can understand that. In retrospect, heading into that meeting, could I have made a Facebook post that said, hey, we're going to potentially also, entertain option 2? In retrospect, sure, absolutely. Wasn't a thought on my mind at the time. And it wasn't done nefariously. It just, I was sitting in that meeting thinking, okay, we have an option to keep everybody together. And that's what I'm hearing from the community, is that they want to keep folks together, keep the kids together. So
Right.
option 2, at the end of the day, two other board members agreed with me. And that's what we went for. The outcry from that after the fact was mixed. People that really wanted option 1 were upset. And those that wanted option 5 were fine with option 2 because it kept the Foxes together with the other community members. And so for me, at the end of the day, why would we not want the community to be together as best we can if it makes sense? And in option 2, it makes sense.
Gotcha. I know it was a hot button issue. Like I said, I didn't pay too much attention to it because I guess it affects me as a resident because it'll affect.
Well, it would have. I mean, option 5 would have left out Hampton Park.
Yeah.
And so, I had a lot of feedback from Hampton Park parents. Hey, don't vote for option 5. We are tied in with, with Harper's Mill. We're tied in with the other area communities.
Right.
We don't want to be left out. And again, right, that resonated with me, along with everyone else saying pretty much the same thing, but for different reasons.
I got
And so, I understand people were upset. I think mainly because they weren't expecting an option 2 to be voted on.
And I think that's what the sentiment I was kind of gathering was like, hey, you said it was going to be 1 or 5.
Right.
And 2 was never seemed to be discussed. And
Yeah.
now all of a sudden option 2 comes out of the,
Well, 2 was discussed.
out of the ether, basically. In the
Yeah,
sense.
two was discussed. We had town halls in which, option 2 was presented along with 1 and 5. The survey had option 2, a part of it as well. So it was never that option 2 was never brought before the public. Where the majority of the board at the time had decided was those 418 votes were enough for them to say, okay, we'll go with 1 and 5.
Yeah.
And I opposed it even then. I didn't want one, just 1 and 5. I wanted 2 to be out there. But again, 2 would have never been a viable vote if we didn't have board members that came out and drove the area and recognized that 2 made sense.
Gotcha. So we kind of talked about the hot button topics and so on like that with the options and so on, but
Yeah.
now just kind of you and I just kind of resume talk a little bit about we've had a closer to a normal winter, they're calling it, I guess.
Yeah.
Like where we're getting a little bit of that. So they've actually missed some school this year. So where does that stand?
Sure. So, we build in snow days, if you will,
Right.
into our schedule. We have exhausted all of our snow days. And so now the benefit to that is they were, declared states of emergency. So if we were to have anything else happen, we can extend our school schedule or I should say, or we can go to the state Department of Education and essentially file for a waiver to excuse the seat time hours that are required in a school year because of the state of emergency. So that would be a judgment call, obviously, if we get to that. Now, it's kind of strange talking about that because next week it's going to be in the 70s all week.
Right.
But, we've had Easter snow before. So,
Absolutely. There's always that
Can't rule it out.
But St. Patrick's Day storm or something, like you can't rule out either, you know?
Absolutely. If we cross that bridge, that would be, the path that would be taken for that. But nothing that we can't, petition for and handle.
Well, I'm sure kids don't want to go to school any extra days.
No, they don't. No, I know my kids don't.
Yeah, yeah. I remember as a kid, I grew up in Northwest PA, so a snow day was very difficult to come by.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, it had to be
Blizzard conditions.
Yeah, blizzard conditions or below zero kind of thing before they would call it. You know what I mean?
Now we can have 2-hour delays.
Yeah, I saw you had a couple of those.
And that doesn't impact what the state requires of us. We're still able to get the seat time in and the class schedules and what have you. But it's when we close all together, that's where the rubber meets the road that we have to manage.
Right. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that you've been coming to Kevin.
Yes.
For barber. Kevin
does an excellent job.
Yep. Kevin hooked you up today.
Yes.
Even with the shave and everything.
Yep. He's good. That's why I keep going back.
Yep. Yep.
It's hard to. I think of a barber like I think of my doctor and mechanic.
Right.
Like once you find a good one and you trust them, you don't go anywhere else.
So in the military, we'll go backtrack, but that's one of the things. Like when you go to a new base,
yes,
that's one of the first things you ask everybody. Like, who do you go see?
Exactly.
Who's the barber?
Yes.
And they'll tell you like at the base exchange, the AFES, or I'm not sure for Marine Corps, but for Army Air Force, like the AFES Barbershop or whatever. Like,
we got
all
those.
Right, they'll be like, oh, hey, Richard's the guy you want.
Yes.
So you take your ticket and I'm waiting for Richard.
I'm waiting for Richard. And you can be there 2 hours waiting for Richard because everybody else was too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they know word gets around pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, I've never had a bad haircut from Kevin. So
no, and the thing of sort of tout our shop a little bit, all of our barbers here do a great job. I mean, or else they wouldn't be with us. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
But of course, they all have their own personal style, and everybody
Correct.
has their own personal preference, which we get and we understand. You know what I mean? So
yeah, Daniel's cut my hair before, did an excellent job. Did my boys as well. Kevin does my boys too. Yeah. Daniel did it one time. So no, everyone. I agree. I haven't seen anyone complaining. So that's a good thing.
Like I said, they all have their strengths and weaknesses as well, and we always just try to accentuate their strengths and try to limit the weaknesses as best we can. Right?
Correct. Absolutely.
And then we also try to make sure we don't put the wrong person in the right, the wrong chair kind of thing too.
Yep.
And that's what we love about our staff. They're all humble. And they all know their limitation. Like I don't feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, well, that's good.
So,
good to know what you're good with and what you're not good with.
All right, man. Well, it's always great to see you, brother.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We'll definitely have these conversations of as things develop in the Chesterfield County Public Schools.
Absolutely.
People want to hear about it, I'm sure.
Yep. Sounds good, Billy. Thanks so much.
All right, brother. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Well, we certainly want to thank Steve for a great conversation today. He's got a powerful story, going from the Marine Corps to public service and now really making a difference in our community.
Yeah, and I loved what he said about how we really need to stop sitting on the sidelines and actually get involved. He's really right about that. Whether it's in politics, community service, or even just showing up to school board meetings, our voice really matters.
Exactly. And like he said, local politics affect us way more than what's happening up in D.C. So if you're frustrated with something around here in Chesterfield County, like the school system, your taxes, get involved, show up, and make your voice heard.
And hey, we're going to keep those real conversations going. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And as always, if you're in the area, stop by the shop because best conversations happen right here in the chair.
That's right. And until next time, stay sharp, stay engaged, stay bold, and keep pushing forward. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Straight Edge.